I'd like to call to order the June 10th meeting of the Shelby Township Planning Commission. Commissioner Turner has agreed to fill in as the acting secretary, seeing as our secretary is absent this evening.
And I will take the roll.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dallo?
Here.
Commissioner DeSico?
Here.
Commissioner Boutros? Absent. Commissioner Meredith?
Here.
Commissioner Flynn?
Here.
Commissioner Opone? Absent. Commissioner Moore? Absent. Commissioner Turner is here. Chairman Moffett? You're here, so we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. First item was approve of the agenda.
So move.
Support.
Been moved and supported. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. The next item is approval of the minutes from the May 13th, 2019 meeting.
So move.
Support.
Moved and supported. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, this evening we have two items, same property, same sort of similar issue, rezoning and site plan and accompanying PUD site plan. This issue had been tabled at the previous meeting. There were several issues that the board had directed the applicant to address. I'm going to start off with the planner to give, who's had the opportunity to review what was submitted and sort of give us a status from the township's perspective.
Sure. So let me start with just an overview of what's changed. I'm sure the applicant can weigh in later if I miss something. So the overall design of the project is the same in terms of basic layout and road configuration with a couple of minor exceptions. The first submission had 568 units. This one has 567, so it's a reduction of 1 unit. The number of 90-foot lots were reduced from 136 to 123. The 60-foot wide lots were eliminated. They were substituted with 70-foot lots. There are 85 of those. So it changed the configuration slightly in the southeast corner of the site. They eliminated one of the entrances to 25 Mile Road, the westerly entrance. So there's only one entrance to 25 Mile Road now. That entrance, the one they eliminated, will be configured as a breakaway gate for emergency access only. And we saw a design that's acceptable. There was also a realignment of an entrance to the Preston Corners 80-foot lots on the interior of the site, which was recommended by our traffic consultant. So those were the principal changes. So in terms of my overview, Mr. Chairman, you want me to offer that now?
Yeah, please.
So I think when you look at a project, it's 350 acres, you need to look at it through two different lenses. The first is the macro. And that way, and under that lens, this project is reasonably well aligned with the master plan in terms of overall density. When we extended sanitary sewers to the area, there was no likelihood. We really abandoned the policy of having 3/4 acre lots. So with the sanitary sewers extended, some change in density would be appropriate. I would point out that the density of this development overall is less than 2 units per acre, and frankly, we could establish the R1A classification here because of the density and still meet the criteria for units per acre. The average lot size is 14,464 square feet, which is consistent with the overall R1B lot size. And the other factor I think that's favorable, this cluster technique where they've clustered development and interspersed the open space is not a type of design we've seen in this community on a regular basis, so that was well done. At a micro level, I think the project is a bit less successful and falls short of meeting a couple of key zoning ordinance criteria. And I want to focus first on building design. There's a section of the PUD ordinance that says all sides of buildings shall be constructed of aesthetically pleasing brick and/or stone building materials or other similar durable decorative building materials as may be approved by the Planning Commission. Evaluation of project appearance shall be based on quality of design, relationship to surroundings, sensitive integration of form, texture, colors with landscape and setting. Now, it's hard to evaluate whether or not these building plans meet that criteria when you don't have side and rear elevations. So, when you drive through the neighborhoods to the south, Preston Pines, Giant Oaks, Deagle Farms, and Wildwood Point, predominantly the buildings are of brick with some siding, maybe on upper floors on the back and side. So that's really what we're looking for here. Again, we don't know. We can't tell because that hasn't been provided. The second criteria is the abundance of front entry garages. So I think about 40% of their models had front entry garages. Now, I don't know that front entry garages is the only important criteria in the design of a sub, but when you look at, again, the pattern of development to the south, that's the largely predominant development pattern. So in my view, context is important here, and I don't think I don't feel comfortable that these building designs meet those criteria. Another concern was the 5-foot side yard setbacks, which were proposed on some of the units. The building department has indicated that's been a challenge with them. We've done this in the past. And it may be that they would exceed those 5 foot, but with 5 feet, you have overhangs which then encroach into setbacks and sometimes require complicated fire ratings on the eaves of a building, which, again, we don't want to create additional problems for the building department. So those are the key concerns from the design standpoint or the technical standpoint. Our traffic consultant did weigh in on this again, and they did acknowledge some changes, but one of their concerns was the 26 Mile Road operations and the entrance by the school. That hasn't been addressed. There's no pedestrian connection to the school. If you have 565 units and you're next to an elementary school, I think you'd want to provide a pedestrian connection. And the boulevard entrance design, they're still not satisfied. They don't like the boulevard entrance for traffic movement, and they've suggested those be eliminated. So, again, looking at the macro, I think there's some large merit to this project, but at the micro, I'm still not satisfied that we've satisfied all the criteria in the zoning ordinance, and I couldn't recommend approval, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll ask the petitioner to come up to address the issues largely that had remained at issue after the previous meeting.
I'll start. Okay.
Name and address, please.
Good evening, everybody. Greg Windingland with Lombardo Homes, 13,001 23 Mile Road, Shelby Township, Michigan, 48315. With me tonight is Anthony Lombardo, our CEO, as well as Joe Klee, one of our land development our land development manager, and Brandon Wagner, our project manager for this site. We would like to give you kind of an update of where we've been since the last meeting and see where that goes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do that, and then I'll ask you when we get to the architecturals and that, or other things. So again, thank you for the opportunity to come back before you folks. It was an issue, as you mentioned, was tabled at, I think it was the March 25th meeting, Planning Commission meeting. So if we can go to the next slide, please. As we always do, we like to provide an agenda for the commission and for the audience to try to make the most efficient use of your time. If you'll give me about 20 minutes, I'll try to get through the update that we have and see if we can answer most, if not all, the questions that you have. We want to talk about the purpose of tonight's meeting, the previous meetings that we've had, the key issues and concerns that we've had, including density, traffic, and the architectural features, and then take any questions and answers.
Well, hopefully your purpose of tonight's meeting is going to dovetail with our purpose of the meeting, because that's frankly a little bit more important. So,
Absolutely.
all right.
Absolutely. Next slide, please. And again, the agendas, that is our contact information and so on. I won't go through the history of Lombardo. We're pretty well established in Shelby Township. The contact information for our team. Next slide, please. And again, just very briefly, I think everybody's very aware of the property that we're talking about. This shows Section 1 as well as the general outline of Preston Corners, and then the various properties and buildings that surround us. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll take this. Next slide, if you don't mind. So as part of this PUD process, next slide, I don't know exactly what it is, but should be the meetings. We have held informal and formal meetings with the township and the residents. And really what developed through that plan was the plan you see today, creating open space that is along the main streets where there's accessible to the residents, looking at the lot sizes, the type of product. So we met on June 26 in 2017. And it outlines August 29th of 2018, March 25th of 2019. So we've met multiple times, getting the residents' input probably the one thing we missed, which Glenn kind of mentioned, was the product and offering front entry garages, which you're going to find out through this presentation. We're changing all that except for like 15% of the overall community for the single family. So I think you'll be pretty happy with that. You might not accept that 15%. We can talk about that, as well as everything will be first floor full brick. So it's not as if it's going, except if you accept a different type of architectural design, whereas, and we're going to show you images of that architectural design where first full brick doesn't work with that type of architecture, which the township will have the ability to prove, or the planning commission. So not only did we do that process, meeting with the residents multiple times, meeting with you, getting that input, we really developed a site plan, and as Glenn would say, a macro level, really meets the intent of the PUD. We have now, since we received last Thursday, or Wednesday or Thursday, I'm not sure, but Wednesday or Thursday, we received Glenn's review about the product design. We're offering you today that all but one portion of it will be all side entry garages, first floor full brick, as well as if there's an architecture that accepts not first full brick, you'll have an opportunity to review. So I think that hopefully addresses some of Glenn's major concerns with the product design. But you're going to hear all that through this process. I got to read my PowerPoint. I'm just doing it from the top of my head. You know, overall, our density, as Glenn has suggested, R1B is not an inappropriate zoning. It might be R1A. But ultimately, the R1B fits the master plan. The density is not an issue. If you look at the surrounding areas, we're within or close to the density that they're developed in. So from a density perspective, absolutely, it makes sense in R1B zoning, I think. Ultimately, though, we're really under the density that we're proposing is an R1A, which is a less dense development. Traffic, no, we'll contribute. We'll contribute our fair share to what that traffic impact is. We have to establish that based on some guidelines, and you'll hear further about that. With that, I guess I would let Greg make the rest of the presentation in more detail and show you the elevations, show the product changes we've made, show the changes we've made in the last couple of days to get you a better understanding of what we're proposing, and also addressing Glenn's concerns.
Okay.
So, with that.
Thank you. If you go to the next slide, please. One of the things that we just wanted to point out is the length of time between a couple of the meetings. Between August 29th and March 25th, we had 7 months, and it's an unusually long time. We had the Christmas holiday in there. There was a concern that if we tried to have a meeting around the Christmas holiday, there would be the perception that either we as a developer or the township was trying to not give sufficient opportunity for the residents, so we avoided that. The January meeting was when we were having the bitter cold and the snow and all that, so that meeting wound up being canceled. Glenn has, all along, and we've agreed with it, has wanted to have this be a sole agenda item, so that was why we weren't able to be on the February meeting. Next slide, please. Anthony's kind of highlighted these, so instead of talking about these at this point, I'd like to talk to him in detail as we drill down a little bit further. So if you'd go 2 more slides, please. That one there, please. Thank you. So the density has been a concern that we've heard from the residents pretty much since day one. We agree that the proposed density or the proposed rezoning is very reasonable with what your master plan now calls for. The dwelling units per acre, 1.61 is our overall. The 2.06 is if you take out the unbuildable areas. R1B allows up to 3 units per acre. Interestingly, if you look at the areas surrounding us, in the center you see our net density at 2.06. If you look at the sites across 25 Mile Road from us, as well as the site that was recently approved to the west of us, west of the fire station, there's densities that are, we're at the low end of that other than one. There's one lower than us. The rest are all higher than us. If you take the overall density, including the open space area, because the two sites that you see with the blue coloring have significant open space included in them. So if you take those densities, again, they match very close to ours. So we really think the density shouldn't be an issue. We understand that people are concerned about the number of units, but again, we'd ask you to keep in mind that this is comprising almost an entire square mile. Next slide, please. For the traffic improvements, again, we have agreed to pay what the fair share is of the traffic burden that we cause, and that would be through accepted standards. The agencies, that would be the MTA and AASHTO, that have formulas to come up with how we could determine that, and working with the township, we would figure out whether that was paid up front or paid as the different components develop, or however we would be agreeable to working with the township in whatever form that would make sense. Glenn earlier alluded to the recommendations of the traffic consultant that was engaged by the township. The 26-mile operations, it does meet the Macomb County Department of Roads criteria. Our engineer did not verify that through your traffic consultant, and for that we apologize. We can address that. The Schoener Access, as was mentioned, we did address that. The 25-mile road access, we did address that. There was a concern that our westerly connection was too close to Schoener, so that was eliminated and converted to a emergency access only. The pedestrian connection to the school, we agreed we could do 1 or 2 connections, and we can certainly include that. These next items we can address during the engineering review process. The mid-block crossings for pedestrians, we can do that. The traffic circle, there was some concern over the geometrics of the traffic circle. Again, those are items that can be addressed at the engineering process. The boulevard entrances, we would like to maintain those if the Planning Commission would like those eliminated. And again, that was the suggestion of your traffic consultant. We're willing to do that. For aesthetics and entrance features, we would like to maintain those. We're willing to eliminate those if that's the wish of the Planning Commission. Next slide, please. For the architectural features, as Glenn had alluded to, the township ordinance for the PUD requires essentially full brick, all 4 sides of the home on the first floor, as well as any other variations from that being approved by the Planning Commission. If you look at the 2 photos in there, those are 2 homes that are very nice homes that do not have full brick, and would therefore not be eligible to be built in any of these communities, which we don't know if we don't think that's the intent of the brick requirement. But those would be examples of homes that we would not be able to build in the communities if the full brick requirement was instituted. What we would propose, and again, these are plans in 2019. Our first homes are probably late 2020, maybe even 2021. Just like automobiles and refrigerators and everything else, there's changes, there's new models that come out and things like that. So to show exact plans that we're going to be proposing is very difficult tonight, because through evolution those will be changing. What we would like to offer is, at the time we open each component, we would provide elevations for review at that time, whether they were reviewed administratively or back at the Planning Commission.
But the approval.
Into the microphone, please.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
But the approval will require first floor full brick and consistent with the elevations we're going to show you today, except for the exception, which if the Planning Commission or the township, however the review process would allow us to do alternative elevations that meet the trend in the current environment. So you're assured that it matches the existing housing in the township that you currently see, but if there's a trend change, I'll say it again. If there's a trend change, the Planning Commission, we want the opportunity to come back and say that those elevations are acceptable. The elevations he's showing you are the cranbrick elevations. They're $1 million houses. These are people that
So beyond the 15%, you want the ability.
just, I want to be able to come back. I want to be able the opportunity to come back and say, hey, this is the trend. Are you okay with it? You could say no as a township in the Planning Commission, and you could say yes, but it's up to your control. So saying that, it's very consistent, the architecture we're proposing to what's existing, but we want the opportunity to come back and say, can we do this? Based on the market and what the people are looking for.
Okay.
You want to stay there and talk about the elevations that are coming up?
Okay. I'm going to talk about the elevations next slide, I guess. So one of the part of the planning department's concerns were the front entry garages. We showed these, you see the elevations in those three segments of the community. We proposed front entry garages combined with side entry garages, which we're going to eliminate. That's why you see the X through them. If you, next slide. This is what we're proposing to replace it, an example. So all those components, which are highlighted in yellow, will all be side entry garages, first full brick, similar to these elevations. So again, it's one of the things we didn't focus on during all those meetings we had for some reason. And once we got Glenn's review or the planning department's review on the product, we have agreed to change that. The only component that will have frontage garages that we're currently proposing is on the smaller home sites internal to the community. There's about 15% of the overall product. It's internal along the power lines that we propose front entry garages. It's the only component.
So the 70-foot lots,
The 70-foot
would
lots.
have-
That's correct.
but most of them would have,
Huh?
most of the 70-foot lots would have side turn garages?
Most of all the 70-foot lots would have front entry. So there's a portion of
So how many 70-foot
about
lots?
15%.
The number of 70-foot lots was 85.
85 out of Glen High.
560, 567.
567. And they're internal, and those home sites are internal to the community. And I know that's the biggest concern of the residents as well as the planning commission, is they're not exposed to major streets. It's tried to provide a diversity between product, and we'll discuss that as we get there. But that's the only component that have front entry garages. All the rest, the duplexes have a combination of front entry and side entry. So it's one unit has a front entry garage and one unit has a side entry garage to make it look like a single-family home rather than a duplex or just a for-sale condo, first of all. It is not for rent. They will not be for rent. And that image is shown further in the slides. But what's the next one, Greg?
Keep going through your slides. And
Next slide, if you don't mind, whoever's changing that. This is our tradition series. This is the 90-foot home sites. Again, ranging from probably 2,900, well, ranches are about 2,200 square feet to 2,900 square feet. Again, all side entry garages. Next slide, please. The 100-foot lots, which is a component, will have that same series home, plus the Cranbrook. Cranbrook will offer, our custom home division will also offer Cranbrook homes in there. Next slide, please. That's the type of product Cranbrook would be building. Next slide, please. That's the duplex. That's the for-sale condominiums. Again, not for rent. Specifically designed to have a combination of one front entry garage and one side entry garage, so that it looks like a single-family home, but yet it's a two-unit building designed for empty nesters. The price point there will be generally for about $400,000 to $450,000, so it's not something that's that inexpensive. And the next slide, please. The biggest, I think the biggest issue we'll discuss tonight is the internal component of the 70-foot home sites, which originally were 60-foot. We changed them to 70-foot, where they have front entry garages, again, ranging from anywhere from 2,000 square feet to as much as 2,800 square feet. So that's the type of product we're proposing, this being the most controversial. Because I know everybody's concerned about the front entry garages. With that, would you add anything?
you don't need to speak about
Oh,
sizes.
yeah, setbacks. Thank God I got Greg here. Next slide, please. One of the things that's been mentioned a lot is the building department and setbacks. One of the things they're concerned about, which came up in the Manors at Central Park, which we built quite a few homes in there, was when you have houses 10 feet or less apart, you must have some fire protection between the residences. In no case will any building be less than 15 feet apart in this entire community. So the concern of the fire department, I understand. I've actually learned from your building department that I have to have 11 feet between structures, because if you don't, you have to fire protect the overhangs, which is difficult. And what we're proposing is, on all the home sites, I want to keep the 5-foot minimum side yard that allows me to do the side entry garages, and we have enough room to do the grading with a swale on the lot line. So that gives us at least a minimum of 20 feet for the side entry garages, which we probably do a little bit more than that. So I'd like to keep the 5-foot side yards with a minimum of 15 feet between structures, so it addresses the building department's concerns. And where there's a side entry garage, a minimum of 20 feet from the lot line to the face of the garage. So we can address that concern. We can solve the building department's problem, but yet keep the 5-foot side yard to accommodate the request of side entry garages. Next slide, probably.
As far as just, these were just for backup.
Okay, so we're good. If there's any questions?
Questions?
I'll put a motion on the floor for discussion purposes.
Yeah.
This one's yours.
Okay.
Mr. Flynn?
If there's a second, I'll go first on comments.
Sure.
I'd move to recommend denial of rezoning position number 0117 for Southeast Michigan Land Holdings for LLC for the following reason. The property can be utilized as zoned. The current zoning is appropriate and reasonable. The proposal does not meet the standards of the zoning ordinance. The requested zoning is not consistent with surrounding existing zoning. And I would further move to recommend denial of application number 1726 for Southeast Michigan Land Holdings for the reason that the proposal does not have merit and does not have the potential to meet the township ordinance's applicable PUD requirements, in that it does not achieve economic and efficient use of land, natural resources, energy, and the provision of public service utilities. It does not provide better housing, particularly suited to the needs of the township, and does not meet the standards of the zoning ordinance, and it is not consistent with surrounding existing zoning issues.
Is there support of that motion?
Support.
Support by the CPAC. All right, just so.
Yeah, that's not necessary, folks, but
Just so, so we're clear too, that we're making a recommendation to the township board, who may or may not choose to act on our recommendation.
and this motion was written by the attorney. I just really want to be clear that we've met with you guys several times, and we've been very clear that the small lots were not going to happen. And I met with 2 trustees on an informal meeting, which you guys were there. Apparently you didn't hear us then. Then we had the meeting a few months ago. There were, I think, probably about 40 or 50 more people than there are here tonight. And we said again, the small lots are not going to fly. We said the duplexes may fly because the duplexes, I believe there's a market. We may have empty nesters that like them. Sometimes they make better neighbors. And it seems like you want to start the negotiation process from scratch every meeting by just coming this much further towards what we've been asking for all along. So what we've been asking for all along is you've got to have 80, 90 footers minimum. You got to have side turn garages. I agree with you, 90% of the stuff you're talking about tonight is technical and can be fixed with Glenn. But the time to address that was over the last 2 months, not yesterday. And that could have been handled with a phone call to me, or to Jerry, or to Glenn, or anyone in the planning department. And the fact that you had the meeting with the residents the day after you turned the new plan in, that's not helpful. As the new guy here on planning, representing the political body, my goal is to get projects that we can approve and not waste everybody's time, and it seems like you're doing a lot of that. So, having said that, I believe eventually you can get something built there. I think if you had listened to us, you'd be putting a shovel in the ground already. You've got to come, when we say It's got to be 80 or 90 footers. We're not negotiating. We're saying it's got to be 80 or 90 footers. So I think that kind of puts a bow on it. And I know Anthony, or Mr. Lombardo, he's a reputable builder. He's done a lot of good stuff in Shelby. So I'm kind of, you may see it on my face, I'm a little bummed that we had to come to this point in order to get your attention. But at this point, it's the right thing to do as far as I'm concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I think this board hasn't been dismissive of what your requests are, but I think requiring an 80 to, if somebody could look at me while I'm talking, I'm actually addressing to require an 80 to 90 foot minimum division off of an R1 zoning, I think is reasonable. Okay, I think we're meeting, we're attempting to get to a place where, not everyone's going to be happy, okay? There are folks that say, don't cut one tree, don't build anything, and that might be a majority, might be a majority of the people in the room, I don't know. But we know that that's not reasonable. But what we are requesting, I think, and how we've reacted, and I know, we have, and I've dealt with pretty much most of the planning departments in this county and several in the state, and we have probably one of the best, most accommodating, and you know that because you've done business a lot of places, and I challenge you to name one that's been better, to try to work to find out a way to get to a point where, we can get something, something adopted. I don't need to preach anymore, I'm sorry. To the board, anyone else have any questions before I call the roll?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Turner.
I didn't have the luxury of being at the last meeting, but I did watch the meeting afterwards, and I'm going to offer some comments based on that and what I heard here tonight. Piggybacking on what Mr. Flynn said, you've met with the township and you met with the residents to get the message, and apparently you haven't gotten the message. I have heard no clear justification why you need 70-foot lots. None. You didn't make it here tonight. The building material, well, it doesn't meet the PUD. It says brick on all four sides. It doesn't say brick on the first floor, negotiable down the line to something else based on the trends in the market. You've been agreeable to work with the township, but one thing you did say tonight is you said it's difficult to show the exact plans for architectural renderings because you need to know what's going to happen in the marketplace. Well, others that have come before us have shown very clear renderings of what they want to build, and they've never raised a concern that they may need to change it a year or two depending on what the market shows. And Mr. Nguyen, did you say this plan overall I think is somewhat good? Again, you've got to address the technical issues that were brought up last time, and you didn't address it here. This could be built like this, tweaked as an R1A?
You could, based on density, and under the PUD, we're not really looking at matching the exact standards of the ordinance for lot size and lot width. So you measure that compliance with the density by how many units per acre are you allowed. And under the PUD for R1B, you can go to 3 units per acre, and R1A, you could be, I think, 2.2 units per acre. So kind of a middle ground, and it still gives them the yield that they would need, with maybe some exceptions if they have to make those lots bigger. But it's well within those density parameters.
That's what I thought I heard. So if it can stay R1A, why are we having a discussion about rezoning it at all? So, Mr. Lombardo, I know you've been around.
But
Go ahead.
It's zoned R1 now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
even
So
in
on
R1A, we'd have to make allowances, as part of the, could we negotiate down to even a 70-foot lot?
Right. You're still going to be in this position.
But it's still, that's what the township's giving on that, so.
I misspoke on that. I stand corrected. But Mr. Lombardo, I know you've been around the township for years, and it is bumming to know that we've got a plan here that you could build, but you've just not gotten the clear message of what is agreeable for that area. I don't know what else to say.
Any other comments from the board? No?
So for the R1B zoning, to segment this, I understand what the Planning Commission is saying. I understand, and I think we've made those after receiving the latest review. We've understood, maybe it took us a long time, what we need to do to make the Planning Commission happy. And I'm getting your theme. But at the same time, I think the R1B zoning is consistent with the master plan, if I'm not mistaken. So I understand denying my PUD approval for what I've proposed, but I don't necessarily understand why we would postpone the rezoning to R1B.
Mr. Chairman.
I'd ask that question, I guess.
I think
don't
since
know who'd ask
the
it to.
two applications are combined, I think to do one without the other makes no sense.
Fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
That's just, it's more of a,
Submitted them together. and
so
you-
when you submit them
I-
together, I think it
yeah.
begs, yeah.
So,
And if I may ask Glenn, if I may?
Sure.
Is the master plan consistent with an R1B zoning?
We would accept 3 units per acre with some clustering. Yeah, as I said, on the macro scale, it works well. But you
Right.
don't need it
So
all. I
what-
mean, look, it could have been handled differently. That's what I'm
We all
saying.
make mistakes in life, right?
No, I'm not, that's not the point, but, when I read the section of the ordinance that referenced the building materials, I didn't just make that up. I mean, that's been in the ordinance for 15 years. I mean, it's available to me, it's available to you, so.
I understand.
And we've had
I'm
this
not-
discussion. I mean, this isn't the first time the building elevations have come up. And I understand people might want something different. To me, I'm not saying your product is unattractive either, but it's context, context, context. I drove through all those neighborhoods one Friday afternoon, just driving around and saying, what am I seeing? And I'm seeing a different architectural style. I'm not saying theirs is better, yours is worse.
Yeah.
But that dictates what this should be, in my view.
Anthony, and Glenn and I spoke earlier today about just some of the other developments that you've proposed that have been a little outside the box for Shelby Township, the behind the Kroger's at 23 and Hayes. When we approved, I think, 50, 55-foot lots with garages in the back and a sheeter shake frontage, and, I mean, it was, and took a little heat to, there it made sense to have a little bit more density, a little unique kind of product, okay? So it's not like we're not open to alternatives, but, we communicated to you in this area what this board's vision is of the master plan, because, yeah, it's nice that Mr. Nguyen is an excellent resource to it, but ultimately, it's this body that makes that interpretation, makes those decisions on that, so.
Site plan.
And with that, I'm gonna call the question.
Can I, before you do that, may I?
I'm good, thank you. Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. DeSico?
Yes.
Mr. Dallow?
Yes.
Mr. Meredith?
Yes.
Mr. Turner?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So our recommendation to the Township Board will be to deny both these requests. Okay, so
Planning Director's
next
report
planning
and
director's
business from the
report.
floor.
Actually, let me just also explain that, we did have a public hearing. We closed that public hearing. It's why we didn't have a public hearing now. This was a continuation of that meeting. There is business from the floor. So if you want your 3 minutes in front of the camera, you're welcome to take your 3 minutes. But we'll get to that in a second. So with that, planning director's report.
Nothing else, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay. Now business from the floor. Does anyone want to address? Coming up.
Just so everybody knows, the rules are the same as the Township Board. You get 3 minutes, and I'll help the chairman keep time, and I'll give you a 30-second warning.
Robert Kogeman, 14510 25 Mile Road, Shelby Township, Michigan. I would like a little clarification on a couple of the items that come up with this. We're talking about 360 acres, but 60 of it is wetland. So when we're dealing with density and everything, we really should be dealing with 300 acres because that's buildable. The second thing I would like to ask is, we keep talking 567 units. Is that counting the duplexes as 2 units, or is the real number 715 family units? So after I sit down, I would like some clarification on that.
I can answer that.
Okay, Mr. Nguyen.
It's, a duplex is 2 units, so it counts as 2 units. So it's 567. A duplex is 2 units, it counts as 2.
And the first question, I think Mr. Nguyen addressed it, and so did Mr. I can never pronounce, Mr. Gregg addressed that as well. It's 2 units an acre, not counting, because we wanted to know that, answer that question too, is you don't get credit for what you can't build on anyway. So it's 2 units, basically 2.06, something like that, per acre, not counting the wetland. With the wetland, it's like 1.5.
He
Yeah, they,
had a slide that.
even when they did the net, they were still well with under 3 units per acre.
Yeah.
Okay, it's coming up.
Good evening. My name is Steve Berry,
902 Spirea Drive, Shelby Township, 48315. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for the decision that you've chose this evening. I believe many of us agree with that. Along with Bob's comments as far as the densities, on Shelby TV, we understand that 20% of all the police runs are multifamily homes. We're talking that we're intending on using these duplexes as, you know, older folks or elders, you know, where they have their grandchildren come and visit. You're mentioning that you're gonna not rent them out. Listen, we got houses in Wildwood Point that are getting rented out. Who's kidding who, okay? We do not need any more rentals in this community. Again, this facility, I'm nothing against capitalism. There is a $23 million plus profit opportunity for Lombardo Homes. I believe in capitalism, okay? But follow the community.
To the
follow
board,
the
sir,
people.
sir, you address the board.
I'm sorry. Follow the people in what we do. We support you, you support us.
Guess what? We are volunteers.
Okay, I'm
And
just
so
saying.
we represent the whole township, okay?
Okay.
Not a small group of people, not one neighborhood,
Okay.
okay? It's the whole township.
Okay.
All right, so
I'm saying.
don't point
we're
at, don't point at us.
I'm not pointing at you, sir.
No, you had a little threatening tone, okay? So, go ahead.
Excuse my being excited.
I
okay?
understand being passionate about
Okay,
it.
I
but
would
you-
like people to address the infrastructure, because there's very little talk about the roads and the trafficking. Do we understand that these multi-homes will, if in fact they have children, it's gonna result in less dollars per student in each school? The schools are already overpopulated, okay? We need to keep the zoning the way it is. Other questions that I ask is, you know, who's investing in this project? Who's all investors in this project? Are there community leaders? Are there politicians? Who's behind this program? Why can't this be developed in the zone that it is? What's the hardship? What is the hardship to keep it the way it is and keep it comparable to the homes that we have in Preston Pines and Wildwood Point? I would just like to make sure they keep talking about their fair share of expenses for the roads.
30 seconds.
There's nothing ever mentioned about what it is. And to your point, sir, as far as how the market transitions, listen, if we change the zoning the way it is today, and then the market goes down, we can't sell our lots. We need to make 6-family homes, apartments. We need to do this because we've got a huge investment. That's what we need to stay away from. We need to take care of our community.
Okay.
Not with, at the risk of being slightly sarcastic, let's take yes for an answer tonight, folks.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
We unanimously voted to deny this request. Okay. All right, so.
okay.
so
Go ahead when
those-
you're ready, sir.
Yeah.
All right,
so-
thank you. Chairman Moffett and members of the Planning Commission, Kenneth McLaughlin and Dr. Carroll, 54738 Sherwood 25 in Hayes and Lake Burlington. Why are we talking about duplexes? We are real estate investors, and duplexes lower land values. There's all the surrounding homes, all around this area, they're all single-family homes, no duplexes. And one question I have through you to the developer, I fail to understand. Why not just develop it as it is currently zoned? Number two, we suffered severe damage at Burlington Lake when the sewers were put in on the north side of 25 Mile Road. We have a concern here that when this does go ahead, if it goes ahead, there'll be more dewatering, more pumping. We don't want to see our lake damaged again like we just went through. We looked at mud for 90 days out our back window, so we want something to take care of that. Fact number two, 25 Mile Road is a 2-lane road. It's dangerous, it's inadequate. It's got to be widened. 5 lanes would be good, no duplexes. Now, Shelby Township is a great community to live in. I lived in Sterling Heights for 33 years, and I liked it. Now we like Shelby Township. Shelby Township is well-managed, it's upscale. Some say, like a real estate investor friend of mine said, you know, Ken, you live in Shelby Township, that's upscale. And then he said, Shelby Township is the Bloomfield Hills of Macomb County. I said, I agree. What we want to do is maintain the Bloomfield Hills of Macomb County here in Shelby Township, which means not lowering the value. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, sir?
One more.
Ross Rochelo, 52203 Highbury Court, Shelby Township. Thank you for your decision. I'm sure you're all aware, our roads are jammed up. Our schools are filled. What I would like to see is the zoning. I heard the one gentleman recommend that it's 15-year-old zoning. Maybe that needs to be updated. We're building everywhere in Shelby now. It's getting very crowded. I have nothing against new development, but I think that our plan needs to be updated as well. So that, we're not gonna get smaller lots, we're not gonna get duplexes. And I think it needs to be changed with the times. And that's my suggestion. Good point, you, sir.
Thank you.
I'll vote you next time.
Okay.
I
Anyone
think
else?
that wraps it up, Mr. Chairman. I'd move to adjourn.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All in
Oh, wait,
favor?
there's one more.
Oh,
Hi, good evening. Deborah Kita, 53336 Villa Circle, Shelby Township. I'd like to thank you as well for your voting this evening as you have, and for allowing us to come and to show our support, even though you've said we don't have, even though you've told us that you're voting yes, or no, excuse me. We only want to come up here to show our support as well. It's not that we're not hearing you. I just want to make two comments. I am a resident of over 32 years, so I have skin in the game. And then I'm also a realtor, so I get to see a lot of this impacts front row. A couple of things I just want to say is thank you for safeguarding our community. Shelby Township is unique. It's special. And I really hope that we continue, and I know that's why you sit up here on these panels, is to keep it that way. It's easy to be not special. There's a lot of communities out there that are not special, trust me. I'm in them all the time. But this is unique. It's special. You're safeguarding something. Once you give it up, we won't get it back again. It'll be gone. So you have really a great responsibility. And we need you at our community level to understand how important you are to us. We depend on you, we need you, and we love our community and we want to keep it that way. So thank you for that. And then the other thing is protecting our property value as well. By maintaining the property size. Once we give that up, we can't get that back either. So thank you very much.
Okay, you got the question? Oh,
nah, you got one more.
Hannah Czerwinska, 54718 White Spruce Lane. As a homeowner, I spoke before, so obviously you guys heard it, and thank you for listening to us. We want to protect the value of our property. We are very proud to be residents of Shelby. And any good development, we need to develop the land, but it needs to be smart. And suggestion to any developers, we don't need duplexes, but we do need ranches. I have many clients asking for ranch. We have to go out of the area because there are not many turning around. It used to be a trend to build huge to make the biggest profit, but you can still charge for the ranch, and people will be coming because they don't want to go to duplex or to retirement home. They can have a service at home and be in their own home. So we need ranches. Any size, smaller like 2,000, and you can go to 3,000. There will be always a client for it. But we don't want to be jammed up. I'm getting to the age that maybe I should be considered, but thank God I have ranch, and that's why I built ranch. So I can just apart at one point from my own home, not somebody else's. So that's the only suggestion, and thank you for keeping Shelby Township the way it is, and even beautifying if we keep up with the size of the lots and the homes that we want to have around.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to make one quick point. You know, I mean, we're fortunate that Mr. Lombardo invests in our township and has some tremendous product and developments, and our township is a better place because he does business here. You know, so we may disagree with some of the elements, and some of them a little more significant parts of the elements, but hopefully, you know, again, it's just a disagreement, and then once, you know,
I would echo that. I said that earlier. He's a reputable guy. I know him, you know. Friends can disagree sometimes, and this is one of those things, but I think we'll get to something eventually that we can
no,
improve.
the township has standards, and then, you know, sometimes we're going to disagree with those that want to do business here.
Township resident as well, I pay taxes here.
Okay. So Mr. Flynn likes you even better, so. All right. With that, I don't see anyone else with a hand up. Mr. Flynn,
You got the motion on the floor.
is there support? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned.